Hi, everyone. I just wanted to do a quick little lecture on Chapter 20 since we don't get a chance to meet today. And you can feel free to take this information, use this information in your notes as well. Today, we're moving forward with the Industrial Revolution. We are moving out of the cottage industry that was described 2 chapters ago, but we're going to hit some of the same inventions and some of the same larger concepts along the way here. So as we do this, please keep in mind that the Industrial Revolution, this is the first of two. Post-Civil War in the United States and in other places, we see sort of the second version, I guess, the Industrial Revolution 2.0, where we see this reach even higher heights, I suppose. Foundations. So why Britain to start with? Number one, with the enclosure movement in Britain, we've talked about the agricultural revolution. We see farms that are owned by more and more wealthy people. You're able to grow more food on less land than ever before, and that means more food for everybody else. And what that does is develop a more capitalistic society because you're going to have now more money. You're not just working the land in an attempt to survive. You're working the land as a way to create or turn profit. And then you now have that money that you can use to spend it on other things, on disposable income type deals or other food stores or anything else really. And so what that does is allows people to specialize in different industries other than just agriculture. Um, Another reason that the Industrial Revolution is going to happen in Britain versus other places, at least at first, is we have Napoleon trying to create this enormous French empire. And as a result of that, Europe is in the midst of all of these different wars up through 1815, whereas Britain is able to have a very stable government. The constitutional monarchy that was established in the Glorious Revolution of 1688 with William and Mary has continued. We see Parliament and the monarchy not struggling over power, but having an understanding of what their roles are, with Parliament gaining more power than the monarchy, typically, is the way we think of it. And so while all that is going on, it's creating a stable base for people to learn. We kind of see this in the Crusades going back a ways too, where now that the fighting has ended in the Crusades, you've had all this interaction, and that allows for more stability and for more learning to take place. And that's kind of how the Renaissance comes to be. We also see larger markets. Britain has expanded beyond anyone else in terms of early colonial powers, the United States, with India. And so you have these much, much larger markets than anybody else in which to sell the goods that you're going to then produce. That creates a demand for more and more goods. That also creates larger amounts of larger amounts of resources or raw materials that can then be manufactured using the ideas from the Industrial Revolution. So all of that combining together is allowing Britain to lead the way in terms of this. We did mention with the article earlier in the week about the Enlightenment principles affecting Britain. So you're talking about people like John Locke in the late 1600s. That's kind of forcing these ideas forward, that it's up to more than just the monarchy to kind of develop, okay, here's what our country is going to be. And we see, at least microeconomically speaking, meaning within the country, the nation of Great Britain itself, we see these elements of capitalism where it's people trying to make money, entrepreneurs taking business risks in order to try and create more wealth. Again, we're still in the throes of mercantilism. We're still in the throes of early colonialization and colonization. Colonialization, I'm pretty sure isn't a word, but whatever, we move on. All of this is going on in Britain, and you don't see those same things going on in other places in Europe, and so therefore we see Britain really take the lead. We also see a lot of these British inventions, things like the spinning jenny, the water frame, the ability to take yarn and then take cotton, especially from India, and now that, well, prior to the loss of the British colonies in North America, able to produce things at a much higher rate than ever before. We see the development of the mule, which is like a hybrid that allows for you to be able to spin cotton more than ever before, and that's from Samuel Crompton. Gets a big shout out in your textbook, I think. We also see the steam engine, James Watt, and eventually that steam engine is not just used to power plants, power mills of any kind, but it's also used to power transportation. So we see the rocket, that early steam engine being used. And then eventually that develops into transportation, not just of people, but especially of materials from place to place in Britain. Britain, as you'll see in a minute, is more developed in terms of its railroads than anywhere else in the world. And Britain is not incredibly large. And so, really, within any city, the ability to have access to either canals and use of waterways or the use of railroads is really spread throughout the island of Great Britain. We also see new developments in terms of iron making. The smelting process is different than ever before. And this allows for a higher quality of steel and iron to be produced, which allows for stronger and stronger bridges, which again can support higher loads in terms of transportation of materials. So all of this combined together is allowing Britain to lead the way. And so as we look at this map here, 1801, so we are seeing kind of in the midst of the first industrial revolution here, the development of all of these different railroads. You can see how all of these different cities are linked. Even if you're in the center of the island of Great Britain, it's not that far to get to the edges where a port city might be. And that allows for these goods to transfer all over the place. And so we start to see the development of cities versus just towns. That really comes out of the Industrial Revolution. Impacts of the Industrial Revolution. This is kind of the second half of chapter 20. We see a population boom, and we see some people react to that. Thomas Malthus says that there's not going to be enough food to go around, basically. And as a result of this, we're going to see huge problems with overcrowding, overpopulation. He says that this will drive, initially, this is a good thing, but then it will drive the poor to be even poorer as the limited resources become apparent. We do see that urbanization, as I mentioned. However, we see some negative effects of this in Ireland. As a result of the population boom, we see 1840s, 1850. We see a very, very famous Irish potato famine. A lot of the land is owned by rich aristocrats from Britain, and as a result, the people have small and limited land in which to grow their own food. So potatoes are a crop that A, are hardy, and B, don't need a lot of land in order to grow. So when this fungus spreads to potatoes that destroys the potato crop over the course of a few years, this leads to approximately 1 million people dying over the course of this time period, and another 1.5 million to 2 million people who emigrate from Ireland to other places, including especially the United States of America. That's where we see a huge influx of Irish immigrants. Britain, for its part, really doesn't help out these Irish colonies. And in fact, it takes about 3 or 4 years during this time period for them to eliminate a tax that creates an artificial price floor for wheat in an effort to make more money off of their Irish colonies. And so this creates a real problem in Ireland. As we look back at this as historians, this is a time period where Britain really does not step up. And there are instances, I think Queen Victoria at this point is quoted as donating about £1,000, whereas other places are donating ships and ships of food and additional monies, including the United States, to try and help the people of Ireland out. Reforms and backlash against the Industrial Revolution. We see issues with the working conditions. Obviously, as you could well imagine, the working conditions in these factories are not great. Your textbook mentions the adults having trouble adjusting to a new schedule. When you're in an agricultural society, you have the ability to kind of make your own schedule. But as you move into a more industrialized society or an urban environment or a factory, you have set days and set times that you need to work. And that really created a problem for a lot of people to adjust to. In addition, we see the use of children, especially working in these different conditions. And I smile, but it's really kind of a cynical smile in terms of the way that these children were treated. Physical punishment, your textbook goes into some detail there, that's used against kids to try and keep them in line because they can't understand things like logic when you're 5 years old. We also see a group, especially in Britain, called the Luddites, and the Luddites are against technology, and we actually use this term today. So if you have parents who have, the old school Nokia brick cell phone, no GPS, no camera, people might even refer to them as Luddites because they're afraid of technology, and that's what these people were. They thought that the technology, all of these new industrial machines, were going to take jobs away from the population, and the people would starve as a result of this. So they went around smashing machines in factories as a way to try and keep that from happening and voice their displeasure. The urban conditions themselves, this is where we start to see the development of slums in cities, areas where there's blight, there's even some low instances of plague in some different spots because of the conditions that are there. By and large, in terms of social classes, we see the rich get richer and we see a new middle class develop. If you want to relate this back to the French Revolution, this might be considered the upper class of that third estate, the bourgeoisie, where these people are able to make money. These are entrepreneurs, and they are buying businesses. They are creating factories. In some cases, they're creating a nice little mini industry by owning a sheep farm and then owning the wool factory that goes along with it and kind of controlling all aspects of that particular trade. But this new middle class develops and is really trying to spend their way into the aristocracy. Initially, they're just about making money. It's very capitalistic based, but eventually they're going to say, hey, not only do we want the money, we also want the political power as well. So they will start to use that purchasing power to try and jump um, into the aristocracy. I did forget to mention working conditions, coal mines. We really didn't get into that. You can imagine the deplorable conditions where you're just day in and day out removing coal deep underground. We have people dying left and right, and as a result of the conditions, cave-ins, fires to some degree, all kinds of just horrendous working conditions. The last social class that I wanted to mention here is the poor. And for the poor, um, a lot has been made. Initially, we don't really see an increase in terms of living conditions of the poor. If anything, they stay completely stagnant. Eventually, will this develop as the industries develop and more jobs become available in urban areas? Are we going to see an increase in living conditions for the poor? Sure. But if anything, because the rich and the new middle class are continuing to make money, um, the gap between them widens or stays basically the same between the poor and these other groups. Here we have some children working the machines. That looks pretty easy, right? Wouldn't you rather do that instead of school, working on these giant machines that could easily suck your limbs into them and kill or deform you along the way? This is what these children are facing. This is not a pleasant working experience for them. This is just an image, a contemporary image from the time period depicting Great Britain. I believe the city of Manchester, which becomes a very, very industrialized city. Liverpool is up there. London, as you can imagine, includes that. That would be included in there too. But we see the development of these factories, letting off the smoke that is burning, the ability to use coal to burn it to make steam to power these different factories. So if you have any questions, please let me know and have a great day.